and Jeff.
Welcome to another episode of Inside Scoop with Alex and Jeff. I am Jeff Doss, and today I have a special guest with me, new to the Martial Arts Inner Network with his new show, The Traditional Way. Is that right?
That's correct.
All right, Brett Shumway, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing really good, Jeff. How you doing?
I'm doing great. So we're going to have a couple different guests pop in with us as well, as our focus today is talking about the legacy of the NBL. And that is actually how Brett and I met years ago on the circuit, on the NBL circuit. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to have a lot of fun. As what's funny is the NBL has been gone now since 2019. I feel like it keeps getting brought up a lot. So I feel like some people don't really know, have never experienced NBL. And unfortunately, what's sad is that there are some people who are competing, have competed for 5 years or even longer, that never had that, experience to know what that's like to go to a Super Grands, to do that circuit and to just understand, how it was, right? And that's what many of us grew up on. So definitely wanted to educate, but also we're gonna honor the NBL and Boice Lydell and what all had happened. So we got several people that will be coming in. Luis Jimenez will be in very soon, and he was the president of Mexico for many years, and a part of that, he was a part of the first Mexican team that won men's team fighting. So lots of cool stories to share. One more thing though, guys, before we are sponsored by the Virtual Fight Tour, and Jesse Ray had another big event. The King of New York was over the weekend. So hope everyone went out and supported him. Let us know who is watching. Let us know if you went to King of New York and how you enjoyed it. Actually, let me go to our trusty group message and see the results that everyone says. So looks like Bailey Murphy won the grand championship over Tyreek Saint. Devin from Paul Mitchell, Devin Hopper beat Kevin Walker for the open weight. All right. And I believe that Brianna Nurse won both the open weight and grands for female fighting. If I got that wrong, someone correct me. And then I know that Teresa from Keith McKinley School won 35 plus. Yep, from Philly. And Amber Rutherford won the women's forms and weapons grands. And I know some of the several juniors. I know there was several of the females from Team Revolution were there. As always, a great event. Jesse does an awesome job. Did you hear anything about the event as well?
Just from what I saw online, it looks like, Joey Castro was there for men's forms. Also, Rashad was there, I believe, for men's forms.
Yeah.
But, obviously, it's New York, so you're going to get Derek Williams, as always. He's still out there doing it.
Yes, sir.
That's all I really see. I didn't see any individual matchups or how it played out, just from what, posts and whatnot.
Right. Yeah, it's always a big event, always a great job. And Jesse always does cool things like letting you do open weight. If you do one men's fighting division or women's fighting division, you can do the other one, right? For free, no extra cost. So really trying to just help those fighters out and give them as many opportunities to grow. So that's a great thing. All right. So we're going to go into our topic, and this is going to be one you guys don't want to miss. And I know some of you guys are kind of like, I don't know what NBL is. I don't know, So the NBL was the National Black Belt League. I guess technically they say it started in 1990 was the first year of Super Grands, right? It kind of around that time. So what had happened before that, guys, there was many different leagues, right? But the PKL was kind of the one that was came up out of the national North American Karate Circuit, which was the one in the mid 80s. All right. PKL kind of came out of that. From PKL, NASCA spawned off of that, and Boice Lydell was running the magazine. All right, from I believe '86 was when he started doing Smash. So that was his sport martial arts publication, right? I don't remember what exactly all that stood for, but what's up, Mark? So that was what his role was, right? He was the one that was publishing everything, covering everything. And he saw, from what my conversation with him, he saw some issues that were maybe being left out. Some things that he thought were great about the PKL and Karate Illustrated, and that maybe NASCA wasn't highlighting on, right? One of the big things was that there wasn't as much activity on the West Coast in NASCA, which we still see as an issue, right? So Boice really, like, NBL was really big on the West Coast. One of the first 2 or 3 years were West Coast Super Grands, right? The other thing was, yes, thank you to Richard. Reeves Ratings was a part of that as well. And they were entered into, I think that first year, Reeves Ratings was the rating company that NBL used. So there's so much here that some of you guys are probably thinking like I'm speaking another language, but
he had the team too, though. Remember, he had so he had the team with the juniors. He had like Seneca Luther was on there, John Marshall was on there. I think all juniors. Richie was on there when he was still an underbelt.
Yeah, Richie Eldridge.
John Valero
was on there. Brian Ruth was on there.
Yeah, and they were all a junior team, correct? I don't think they had any adults.
Yeah, Jesse Ray was on there. Peter, I believe, I'm not sure if Peter Londay was on there when he was really young, but there was a lot of, Adam Keister was on there. They had a lot of high level junior competitors, and that was in, I believe, '88 when that team was around. And so, yeah, so I mean, he was really pushing the juniors because at the time it was still kind of new. Junior competition was still new, right? So the Smash team was just huge. And if you were on the front of that cover, that was a big deal, So definitely for me growing up, that was how I found out about the NBL, was the magazine. As well as I knew of the underbelt side. I knew the SKIL, which they had the NBL for the black belts and the SKIL, the Sport Karate International League, for the underbelts. And I would always send my points in to be in the magazine, to do that as a kid. And I did the same thing with PKL. PKL had AKL, which you had the Professional Karate League, and then you had the AKL, Amateur Karate League. So there were many things that kind of spawned out of each other, right? The biggest difference, if you want to know the biggest differences in, let's just say, NASCA and NBL, what are some things that maybe come up to you?
Well, see, and that's kind of what I wanted to bring up for the competitors that don't know about the NBL, is a lot of the rules that they're taking advantage of now is because of the NBL. So
exactly.
The fact that you can fight 2 minutes total points, that spawned out of the NBL into NASCA. That you can do more than one forms and one weapons division. That came from the NBL doing it first, and NASCA jumping on the train. It was like early 2000s for some of that, right?
Yes, 2000 was the first year that you could do multiple forms divisions.
Right.
Yes, where you could do a traditional form and a musical form if you wanted to. So yeah, it was very completely brand new, and that had been going on since. And actually, the thing that people don't really understand is that creative forms and contemporary forms, style forms, like, started in the NBL. It was just hard and soft really before, and maybe Korean, Japanese, where there was musical, but really, like, especially for juniors, when I started doing NASCA, it was just 2 musical forms and then 4 or maybe 5. It was 5 forms divisions. So everything was together. There was no traditional and open, so that term of creative and that term of contemporary, that was all started in the NBL, so.
Right. And I think they did a lot of things to start as well. Like, and I think that all comes off from the NBL was so structured with its rules and its ratings, from regionals to nationals to super grands, and everyone knew the deal, right? Everyone came in, they knew what was the rules. There was not very few rule of the day. You get it every now and again, but you didn't get a lot of it in the NBL. Definitely not at a national tournament. So
No, not at a national. You had to be, if you were going to be at that level, be a national tournament, you had to agree to all the rules. If you were a regional, you had some options. But the biggest thing was that you and your conference agreed on, as a conference, we are all going to do this. So when we're speaking these words, some people may be confused. So the way it was set up was there were national conferences, which were worth the most points in seeding for the Super Grants, which was the Super Bowl, the end of the year. You know, unlike NASCA, where it's just the points happen and then whoever has the most points wins. In NBL and SKIL, it was the points and the year happens, you earn points, and then you are seeded based on your how you did throughout the year to still win at the end, and you still had to win and beat those people, right? So the seeds and the other thing was double elimination was a thing in the fighting divisions.
Yep.
So
and I'll be
yeah.
honest with you, Jeff, that's one of the things that attracted me to the NBL is that you had to win it on the floor. So
Right.
if something happened in the year and you missed a tournament or you got
You
injured,
got injured. Yeah.
you could still come back. Heck, how many great fighters did you and I talked about? I lost to one.
Right.
Guy
Yeah.
came out wild card, beat
Yep.
everyone in the division, and beats me on stage for first and second. Like that happened quite a bit, especially in the fighters.
Yes, sir. Yeah, and there's so much. There's 30. So there were 30 Super Grands. Okay, guys. Boice's legacy in sport karate starts way before that. You know, as a lot of people don't know, he was also an instructor. He had some great competitors underneath him, and he was, of course, really big into making stars through the magazine. You know, and that's something that I, you know, when I was a black belt and I was competing more in NASCA, I knew everyone that I could potentially go against in NBL because I read every magazine, read everything. And the articles were really good. They were detailed, you know, of like how this division really broke down, you know. The other thing with the Super Grands was that I guess it didn't happen in the early ones, but later on it went to where the top two went to the finals and you were in the finals to win your title, right? So you got two chances pretty much if you were in there. The top two for forms, top two for fighting each division. So it really made you, it's just a different feeling. If you don't get that feeling, it's hard. The only thing close to that is competing in like the WKA, which isn't as big as it used to be, or the WKC now, the WKU, where there is first round and then the top four move on. But in NBL, it was the top two move on, and that was that head-to-head thing, you know, and then there were even stats, you know, and that was something. There's so many things that the NBL did right that's and there's a reason why, you know, again, if people don't know, some people think that I'm just Mr. NBL. I started actually competing in NASCA. That was where I won all my titles until, you know, and I grew up in the South, so I did do SKIL tournaments. Most of the regional tournaments in my era were SKIL. There were a few NBL ones, but I focused more on NASCA to start because my competition coach was John Valera, who was a NASCA champion. So I did that. 96 was my first national NBL. 93 was my first regional NBL. I did skill ones, but and I went to the Junior Internationals, and it was just a whole new, you know, and I was like, okay, I'm going to get back there and start doing it. 98 was the first year I went to a Super Grands. Then from there, I never missed, you know. So it was really cool because, yeah, Jericho is saying right. For a while, it switched from where it was, you know, East Coast, West Coast, you know,
South.
and the South and the North and everywhere. And it was really cool to, you know, Texas. There were so many different areas, right? As time goes on, that gets harder with changes and things. But it was really just a fun thing to look forward to. When you found out around April or May where Super Grand is going to be, and you always knew it was going to be in this edition of the magazine, right? And when it was, you're like, oh, what's going on? What's going on? And but it was just like a anticipation.
And if you remember, though, he announced it. So, like '99, he announced it at the Tornado Internationals in the middle of the finals. So everyone was sitting around, and I believe, you know what? I know for a fact 'cause I won it. I won the $100 prize he got out for guessing the right city.
Oh, he did that.
So he kind of made it so everyone in the finals was there to watch the finals as well. But it was a contest to see who could get it and who guessed right.
Right. That's awesome. That's awesome. So, and again, guys, Boice is from New York area, which very similar where, area, the same region that you grew up in.
Right.
So you saw him pretty much every tournament as a
Saw him
kid
a
growing
lot, yeah.
up, right?
Yeah.
Saw him a lot. Everyone has different opinions on Boice Lydell. But at the same time, I think people had this wrong opinion that he was just this person that you didn't talk to that was always very closed off and stuff.
And I'll be honest with you, I've had a lot of conversations with Boice, and one thing that Boice does that you don't see on NASCA, I don't think you see it on NASCA. I first met Boice before I was even really doing big tournaments, right? I happened to go to Billy Pine's tournament when I was 12 years old, and I won the Japanese Okinawan division. And next thing I know, I have him and Rich Fukumoto sitting next to me and my mom talking to me about maybe you should come out and do, the national circuit and do this. And we had no idea what we were looking at, right? We just came to a tournament, happened to win, and there you go. But then every time I saw him after that, it was the same thing. He was always trying to get people out on the circuit. He's also always trying to get new people out on the circuit.
Yes.
And I mean, that's the one thing that the NBL did have that I thought was, some people that have been around might think that's a problem, but I loved it. I mean, I love the fact that there's a Brian and Shannon Gallagher who showed up to Colorado one time, won 10, between the two of them, won 10 world titles, and you never saw him again.
Right.
Like, I love the fact that there's always a surprise at Super Grands, and I never made it out to the West Coast until later on for a Super Grands. But, when I show up to Super Grands and compete against, there's a ton of fighters on the West Coast I did not know anything about. And it was an adventure, and it was always something new at Super Grands. You're always going to fight somebody that you never fought before, because when Guatemala comes up with how many competitors did they bring in back in the day?
Oh, it was crazy. Yeah, and that was something too. Is like, especially competing in NASCA, you saw a certain amount of people. You saw later on it got to where there was some parity, where there was actually people doing both circuit crossing, right? But in NASCA, you never saw the Guatemalans from the Schumans. You saw the Perez Guatemalans. So it's funny. It's like, all right, you saw different ones. You didn't really see many from Mexico in NASCA tournaments. You saw Mexico growing in NBL. And really at one point, the biggest tournaments in NBL were in Mexico for years. And, it was crazy. I mean, I remember 68 in men's Japanese, like the first tournament of the year. It's just crazy, right? So many things like that that were something we didn't see, right, everywhere else. So there's so many great things. One thing as well that I thought that Boice did was not only always recruiting new people to join the circuit, but looking for new promoters, and not just going to the people who've had the tournaments for the longest, getting competitors, getting former competitors, getting young promoters, right? I was a promoter at 24, all right? Brian Young was a promoter at I think 23 or something like that, right? Melissa Sayoshin, Apple, same thing. All of us were around that same age. Trevor Nash, I believe, was like 21, maybe 22, right? You just saw, Corky saw a lot of the younger promoters giving everyone a chance. And I thought that was something that wasn't being done, and unfortunately isn't always done in other circuits still. And I think that's something that we need to always be looking at, getting the young blood, getting the opinions of others, I think another thing that people thought was that Boice was very closed off, and he just made all the rules. He made all this and that. This dude still is a it's like a vampire, right? He just stays up all the time. All right. And eventually, and really when you think about it, for someone who's running a business in a league that has people on the West Coast, he kind of had to stay up late, right? So he is calling and asking, all right, well, what do you think about this? What do you think about this rule? This is what I'm thinking. He asked many people's opinion. He took a lot of people's opinion. I think a lot of people, now, once something kind of stuck, he was all right, this is what the rule is. We can't go back and complain about it now when you agreed to do it, you know? And that was something that I always was frustrated with as a promoter was people would just always be like, well, I don't like that rule and I'm not going to stand by it. But you're the one that was a part of it. And you knew what was going on. You voted on it. You have to stand by it for this year. We're not going to change the rule in the middle of the year just because of something, right?
He also did a good job of bringing in divisions for certain regions, right? So let's be honest. Breaking divisions were ruled by the southern states,
Southern
right?
and Texas, yep.
Traditional self-defense, Great Lakes region, we dominated that for years. Other than Dan Baker and Jody Sasaki, and the one year that Don Jacobs guys from Trinidad won it.
Yep.
I mean, the Great Lakes region killed it in traditional self-defense, and I think that's the case with And then even in traditional weapons was kind of that's Japanese Okinawa and traditional weapons is a hodgepodge. West Coast and Northeast.
Canada.
And some of the
Canada
South.
was
Canada. Yeah. We're so close to Canada. I feel like
I know.
That's another state to us. You know what I mean?
That's true. So, but yeah, no, you're right. And then honestly, as it went on, like the continuous divisions became something that you knew Guatemala and Mexico were going to dominate, right?
Yep.
And then you have different areas that just kind of really got into as it got older. Into it, Mexico really got really good at the traditional side, right? The Japanese Okinawan side, right?
The West Coast had great Kempo divisions.
And so did Guatemala. It was going to be Guatemala or them. And so was really, really a cool thing. Yeah, you're right, Andrew. Yep. Dominated by Canada, California for a long time. So.
Well, most of those were Keith's, right? Didn't Keith win like 6 of them in a row?
Keith, Butch won like 6 in a row.
Okay.
Yeah, and then Marcus Young won one, and then Keith, and then Daypuck won some. So, yeah, and so yeah, there's so many just great names that I think unfortunately a lot of people don't speak of because let's just be honest, like NASCA had the bigger tournaments overall, right?
Right.
So and the ones that were around for longer. So that's just kind of the way it is, right? One thing though, a quote I heard today though too is it's not just about about people are saying, oh well, it wasn't a success because it's not around now, or it failed because it's not around. I don't think it failed. It was a successful thing for 30 years, and that was it. It did its time and it did what it needed to do, and Boice, inspired a lot of people and also gave many people opportunity. I think people still have fond memories of the NBL. Some of the schools and coaches that really thrived in the NBL because of the rules and different things. Like Laco Villanueva in El Paso, Texas, he says, that rule book gave me a way to coach my guys, gave me, something I knew how to work with. Same thing with Trevor Nash. We talked about that on our show when he was on. Having that, he could coach better, So.
And it also, in a perfect example, is there divisions that like we're self-defense guys. My school, that's what we do. And there's the U.S. Open, that's it. Like there's no tournaments that do traditional self-defense like we did on the NBL. And there's like really no avenue for us anymore. Not the NBL.
Correct. And same thing with breaking. When it comes to that, there's tournaments in the South. There is, the breaking circuit that has a lot of different, ones, but it's just not always available to everybody. And then the U.S. Open. So, so it was really, really a cool thing. Yeah, you're right, Jericho. Conferences were great. It was it was a reunion, every time. And almost too, when the East Coast group would go over to West Coast Super Grands, it was almost like we were like a team. Kind of like if you're representing America, going to WKC. In some ways, it kind of felt like that. Like in the first year not the first year, but 2010 Sacramento, and 2011 Sacramento, it was like that. It was like there was a small group that
Yeah.
that went over there, and we were all like, all right, yeah, let's go, and you got
So,
really close.
and I'll be honest with you, see, I felt the other way because like I liked going down to the South Circus by myself. Like just our school would go down because there was a time where me and the Axfords, we were going at it so hard on the regional circuit,
Oh yeah,
and then going hard again at the national circuit for first and second. Like
yeah,
it was almost nice to just get away from those guys and compete against somebody else for a chance because like every weekend
right,
we were
right.
up against it. You know
And
what I
see,
mean?
I was the same way down the South because it was me and Jesse Jones competing against
Yep.
each other in every single division. Not because each of us did probably 9 divisions apiece, right? So we would tie. In 2001, I believe we tied 20 times, which
Yeah.
is crazy, right? And
Right.
we went to all the regional tournaments against each other, national tournaments against each other. It was insane. And we both did Korean, Japanese, all the musical stuff. I had to do soft style just to get away from him in one division, right? All right, just have a division that him and I weren't always against each other, and he did the
Right.
same thing with I forgot what traditional weapons, and so it was just kind of funny how that kind of happened, right? But yeah, um, okay, we could talk about that as well. Yeah, his one out was just NBLs were a grind, and at one point I believe that it could,
But it goes into what you're saying about the divisions. I mean, there's
right,
200 black belts there, right? Or 200 people there, and they're all doing 10 divisions, or
right,
a half of them are doing 10 divisions. You got to
correct.
wait for them to move from, and then with the uniform changes for the criteria, there's a lot of stuff that goes into it.
Yeah, there were, and honestly, like it got harder as more divisions were added, but it also got better too as people started starting them earlier and such, right?
And
Um,
yeah, and
to me, there were conferences that figured it out though,
right.
and one of the biggest ones for me was, and how I modeled my tournament out after, and was Pacific Jewel. Pacific Jewel internationals was one of the best and well put together events. The Birches were actually parents. Their son, Brandon Birch, who ended up becoming one of the best traditional like weapons competitors there was, like won so many, right?
Yep.
And a great fighter. And he even after he kind of stopped, they got into it as helping with scorekeeping and helping in different ways, right? And just loved the sport. And they decided to put on a tournament, and they did a really awesome job. And then they taught a lot of people how to put on good tournaments, and they cleaned up some of the unorganization that was happening and made everyone kind of helped everyone get it all together on the West
Right.
Coast for many years. And so they did an awesome job. Noah and Deanna Birch, and I patterned my event after them and then made it work for the East Coast. Same thing with Ron and Diane Kane. They did the same thing. And we kind of led that and taught our areas how to do that. Right. So it was awesome. Yeah. Great customer service, just overall fun event. What were some events in the NBL that you missed or that you really enjoyed?
Oh, well, I got to go with the Upstate Open, right? It's my
Yeah.
instructors tournament. I loved it.
Yes.
And one thing that he did differently is he brought in competitors. So
Yeah.
he brought David Douglas, Gary Wall, Butch Togasala in to showcase, to show Rochester what is out there. There's more out there than just what we have in our local area. We brought those big guys in, and it made it. I mean, anytime David Douglas and when David Douglas and Butch Togasala would do their creative and traditional team form together demo that they did. I don't know if you ever saw
Oh,
that.
I
It's
didn't.
amazing.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing. So that's one. Obviously, for me, Pittsburgh, the Kumite
Kumite later on as that came out on
Absolutely.
the national circuit in 2005 or
God.
maybe 2004.
Oh,
Yeah.
100% Tornadoes.
Yeah,
Best,
Tornadoes was
my
fun.
favorite tournament, not just because it was my first and I'd never lost at Tornadoes, and at least in continuous fighting and some other divisions. I just loved that event where it was at in Kansas City. It was right downtown. It had the mall. It had the 2 hotels connected. It was gorgeous. It was Now for us, I didn't like the 30-hour drive from New York that we did.
Well, that's your fault.
And but other than that, yeah, that's probably my favorite nationals that was put on.
Yeah. There were so many different ones that I went to, for me, and one of the the thing that I saw that always inspired me that I thought was cool was Junior Internationals because it was in the DC area, which is more of a NASCA area. And so to see an NBL tournament there, and you got to see really the best of NASCA, the best of NBL competing against each other on that East Coast, and you saw people from the Midwest and stuff come in. That was fun, and that's what inspired me to when I had my NBL tournament. That's what I wanted to be. And for a while, I was one of the only ones that were able to bring in people from all circuits to that. And a lot of that was inspired off of the Junior Internationals. I went in 96 and 98. Great, and then 98 was the last year they had it actually. Yeah. But Chun-Ri put it on, Jun-Ri's son, and was just a great event. Now, again, there were just things that I remember it being very unorganized at some point, sometimes not, but that's just kind of part of it, other events that kind of came along, for me, Dixieland Nationals was a big event, here was always cool. There were regional events that were just fun, like the Lenore Rumble, which was put on by the Dillingham brothers, right? And that was a regional tournament I started going to, a skill tournament I started going to as a kid, and then it became an NBL later on, and that was a fun event. So yeah, when I got to start doing the West Coast tournament, Golden Gate Internationals, Sin City Rumble, years before that, Las Vegas Legacy. One thing that was cool was in 94 and 93, 94, Stan and Barbie Witts, they had an NBL tournament in the summer and a NASCA tournament in the winter. Okay. That's just awesome. Right. And I thought that was a cool thing, that happened. And,
now the one tournament that I never made it to, and I don't know, I don't think you probably didn't make it there either, but from what I've heard about Guatemala when it was a national,
was humongous. Yeah.
Like when Keith Weston told me, I asked him because there's times that's the only tournament Keith would go to because it was its only national by itself. So he would go win that, and then so I asked him one time. I said, "How was it?" And he said, "Think of Super Grands as an unseeded competitor at its height." He said, "To win that tournament is a beast." So he's like, "You can go down there and get a national seed, but you better be the best person in the division because it's gonna be tough."
Yeah. Yeah. And later on, tournaments in Mexico became like that, like Reto Mex, the Mexican Open became like that, where they were just huge, huge events and just awesome to see that. Right. And then at one point they had the most tournaments. There was like 10 national tournaments in Mexico at one point, almost to where they had to have 3 national conferences because it was just so big. Wow. And so, yeah, I mean, there's many, when I first started NBL, there was like Galveston, there was Hurricane Internationals, there was,
was that Tony Lopez's, right?
No, his was the Yellow Rose. Okay. Ishmael Robles had Galveston, had the Hurricanes. Okay. Yep. Louisiana Pro-Am was great. Slugfest was an amazing event when it was originally there, and then when it took a break and came back. There were just so many great events.
You can't go wrong with downtown New Orleans.
No, yeah, exactly. There was no NASCA national events or World Tour events in New Orleans. I went in '94 to a tournament that the D Mejias put on, and it was actually a NASCA and an NBL rated event back in the day, and that was a great event. But I never went back again to that. So. Yeah, man, just so many great ones. AmeriKick back in the day in Atlantic City was a fun event.
And for me, that was the kickoff event of the year. Yeah. So on the Can-Am circuit, AmeriKick was the first one.
Very important one. So many great events. Like I said, Pacific Jewel was a fun one for me. Even going to El Paso for Sun City Nationals was a great time because it's like, wow. When else am I ever going to go to El Paso, Texas, right? But, fun times there. And just listen to the places that we're naming, right? It's not places that we go to often. Salt Lake City, Utah, Vegas now, like none of that is on the NASCA circuit. So it's very, very different to have that, Now there were different events that moved on to NASCA, like AmeriKick, like Dixieland at one point, like AKA Warrior Cup, or AKA Grand Nationals. Then they're I may be missing one, but yeah. So
As
a
much
lot
as
of, a lot of cool things.
I will say that those were the two events that I wanted more for that didn't happen in 2000, right? So when AKA and Ocean State did dual NBL NASCA.
Well, it wasn't dual. They had just left. They just left.
Okay.
Yeah, Ocean State left and then went back. Yeah.
Okay. So that one, those two events, those were rough ones because that was literally depending on the ring, what rules were being used in the NBL because it was a national. The NBL competitors were not happy. The NASCA competitors weren't happy. All in all, it was just it didn't work out, and that was the one that at that time I really wanted to see those do well, right? Because that was where we needed to go as a sport, right? We needed to bring the two Goliaths together, and at that time in 2000, both were equally
huge.
big, and they were. We needed to. That was a point where if it was going to happen, it should have, and it just unfortunately didn't happen as much.
Right, and there's so many things that spawned off of that. But at that point, that was when you really started to see. At one point, you were either an NBL competitor or a NASCA competitor. And that point, you started seeing people go to both, and that was really a cool thing to see. You had some that from NASCA that came over to the NBL and then stayed and really liked the system, and then you had other ones from NBL went to NASCA and stayed there. So
and I think the reason why they all stayed because it depended on why, right? So at the time, who was leaving NBL to go to NASCA? Raymond, Trevor, Jason, because NASCA was giving $1,000 grants and NBL wasn't.
Actually, NBL started that. NBL was the first one to do that in 2000 and 2001. They were the first one to do that. They were the first one to bring back the overall.
Okay, but there was still more money to be won in NASCA than
not
NBL.
At that time until later on. Until later on, yeah. The reason why was just the sponsorships, the teams that were like, all right, this is why we're taking you there. In the early NBL, there were a lot of teams and there were some sponsorships. Later on, it became more of a school-focused circuit.
Yeah.
Right? Team United from Trevor brought his whole team there. Corky Sykes, World Class, Team Strike Force, bringing their team. Guatemalan team. All those were schools, right? Yeah, they were only giving away $300 for a long time. Yeah, it was more of the there was a prestige there. That's one, and tournaments lasted. You had the big, the diamond ring, the watch, the gold watch. Again, well, the Rolex definitely is, a whole other thing, right? But the sponsors were more going to NASCA. Okay, so that was one of the things. And for you as if you want to be a national team, it's kind of hard to be like, all right, we're a national team, but we're only going to do this one conference that has that's just in California, Utah, and Cincinnati, where you're not really a national team, right? When you do that. So I think that was one of the things. One of the issues that I feel like is why certain tournaments left and things. Super Grands was always going to be the biggest thing, right? And that was the main goal. So once you had a national tournament for many years, like all of us, we want to, what's next for us? What's next? What's next? What else is there, right? And so that is where I believe eventually, and there are probably other reasons why, in disputes, I don't even want to get into that. That's not even a big deal. But eventually you're going to want more, right? So you either go to a circuit that is focused more on just more like a series of individual tournaments, right? So I believe that is, one of the reasons. And was something that was, even though the structure overall was great, but that was something that was doomed to mess up because of that, right? Because of the structure. That was the one downfall of the structure as far as that. So, but yeah, man, what I don't know if we're gonna get anybody else on today, but which is fine. I think we're having a great convo. All right, what impact? We've gone all over the place, but what impact did NBL have on sport karate as far as that we're seeing now, right? So,
for me, traditional divisions, which I
yeah,
don't think it's just
exactly.
I don't think it's just the NBL, but the NBL put, like, I'll be honest with you, I did the NBL traditional divisions.
Yep.
If we did a NASCA tournament, I never did kata at NASCA tournaments when I was younger. I just
Right.
we'd show up and fight, and that's it. Like, I wouldn't. What NASCA was putting off as their traditional divisions was not
Correct.
traditional to us.
Correct.
So the NBL had its faults. It's not 100% traditional on the NBL either. It's
No.
still sport karate, but it was closer to what traditional was. I feel like a guy like who was the guy from the West Coast there?
Kenny Lim.
Kenny Lim.
Yeah.
He came out of that WKF style traditional circuit, walked on
Yep.
the NBL and won.
Did great. Killed it. Yeah.
I don't think he could have done that on NASCA.
Right. Right.
So the traditional guys.
I don't even know if it Keith Weston at one point, because I mean he has, and again, like I speak of Keith Weston at like the highest level because I do think he's one of the best, if not the greatest. But it was just something about it back then, right? It was just different. Like even on NBL, Butch Tokasala won NBL, Gabe Renaga won NASCA. Gabe Renaga just took it to that next little entertainment level that Butch didn't, right? But they both had very similar styles, if you really break it down.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, that's one, because I agree with that too. Having rules. People can say that the traditional challenge came out because of WKF. Really, though, a lot of the original rules. All right, there was a forms list from the WKF, but the other original rules were NBL rules. Okay, and that's where it came from. When that was happening, NBL still had the best teams, right? I'm sorry, the best traditional competitors for many years, for a long time. You know, it was just always just you knew it was going to be judged fairly too.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. Did the Japanese forms and the traditional forms at first or many times win? Yes. But you saw Ramir Mosqueda. You saw myself win a bunch of traditional overall grands. You saw Dan Marshall. You saw Ashley Artis. You saw, Edgar Cordova, Bear Lobe, many guys be able to win grands at tournaments. Chad Mason doing Korean forms. You saw even some have a chance with Kempo. May not have always been happening that much, but you saw it happen. And that was really cool. You saw someone like a Fuak Fan. I know I'm not saying that right, but I'm not going to say it the way that's supposed to be. Who won overall grands with a traditional soft style slow form, right? You're not going to see that many other places.
Here's an odd one that happened regionally. I don't know if it happens for you guys, but we did traditional self-defense in the weapons and kata grands, and we would win with traditional self-defense in the grands as well. So that's just another. But the one thing about even because I've judged at Super Grands just came in and did nothing but judge for, I think 2005 I did it. Right. The one thing that made those divisions better was I remember Boice even asked me. He goes, "Didn't you do Korean forms?" I said, "Yeah, but I don't know nothing about Korean forms. Don't let me judge that." And he put me in the Japanese Okinawan ring. So like he did a very good at putting judges where they knew and what they didn't.
Right. He worked all year long, and if people don't know, I worked from 2011 until the end. I was really highly involved in helping the NBL and had a good relationship with Boice of business relationship of working together to make things, and so we had those conversations of, all right, well, what can we do? Who are the best ones we need for center for this division? What for this and that,
and that makes a difference.
The other thing is too that we're not bringing up, which I feel like is really a hot button topic, is underbelts. NBL SKIL gave something for underbelts, and it gave a circuit, especially the schools, something to chase, to go after, right? that was a big deal. Was
And,
to get that SKIL title.
right. But
The
even
other,
if they didn't do anything else, you
right,
can't tell me that an 8-year-old orange belt gets their picture in a magazine. That's not the
correct,
coolest thing for them ever, right?
correct, correct. Yeah. So there's so many things like that. The other thing that I thought was always cool was, again, records, right? You knew, oh, this person has a record for the most. It was in the magazine. It was in the brochure the next year. Every year there was the who won all the years. You had the whole history in that brochure,
Yep.
and it was really cool. The other thing was the top 25 schools, right?
Yeah.
Knowing who not and people that don't know thought it means the most supporting. No, it wasn't who brought the most. You had to actually you could bring a bunch of cheeseburgers, you may not even make in the top 25, which we saw many times.
Yeah.
You have to win. You have to first place was 3 points, second place was 2 points, and third place was 1 point. Whoever had the most points at the end of the Super Grands, you had the the number one school,
And it was
Guatemala,
always nice to see those guys who only brought like 10 students and be in the top
and you
25.
do well. Yeah, exactly.
That
Yeah.
was great.
Oh, huge, huge, right? But yeah, it was definitely, the magazine was a huge thing that everyone loved, but people, I don't think, understood how much work it took, right? I mean, my God, it's just a bunch. And especially as time went on and magazines got harder to produce, and also people were getting more to the internet, it became kind of a thing like, okay, how are we going to make this continue to work, right? So a lot of things I think at the end came down to numbers. Oh, yes, that's another one I never went to, but there were so many great events. Jericho, Great American Nationals, which was the Boo Heasons that put it on, Jericho's instructor, in San Jose. It was a big tournament, lots of competitors that would go out there. And yeah, you're right, man. Definitely feel like that some things about that are coming back, as I hear there may be an underbelt world event in the making, like an end of the year world event that's kind of like Super Grands for NASCAR. I'm hearing that may be happening, or that is happening. So really, really cool.
And for me, Jeff, like I
Yeah.
said, that's always going to be the thing for me. As you know, like I'm a sports fan. I couldn't ever imagine, the Super Bowl being decided by who won the most games leading up with no playoff.
No,
Like they don't actually play the game. Like
right.
to me, you got to win it on the floor.
Yeah,
I
that
mean,
was
I'd
college
argue,
football back in the day, right? And that's why they
yeah,
changed it.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So we talked about the magazine. We've talked about Latin America. We didn't get as much into as I wanted to with Luis, but we'll probably do that another time. What were some of your big moments or favorite moments in NBL history? There's so many. So yeah, and some of them don't even have to necessarily be at Super Grands, but there was a lot, right?
I got quite a few, but I'd
Let's
have to
just kind of
say
go back and forth. Yeah,
my most memorable one, Juancho knocking out Brian Schwartz in continuous fighting, because at that time he was
touchable.
unbeaten in kickboxing.
Right.
He comes to 99 Super Grands on stage and fights Juan Jose Rodriguez, for anyone who doesn't know, out
Yeah.
of Guatemala. The guy was a juggernaut. He was the most intense
Yeah, everything.
competitor there was, and he did everything. He did the bow, and then one time he did flying commas. And, I mean, he did a lot of stuff. But
Right.
he caught Brian with, it was just perfect timing. I don't think he hit him that hard. He just
Right.
hook punched him in the jaw and dropped him, and the whole crowd went like silent, because
Yeah.
I said Brian Schwartz was a world champion kickboxer,
Right.
and undefeated, and
Yeah.
so that one I'll never forget that. That
Yeah.
one was, and I
Yeah.
was like second row from the stage, right where it happened, so I was like look up, and watch the whole thing. I couldn't
Yeah.
forget
This is a good one. Yeah, Jericho, you're right. Raymond had number one seed for Super Grands, threw it away and fought wild card all the way. He did that several times. There's many wild card moments that, over the
that. Ooh,
years that I remember, Trevor doing
Trevor's
it
was
many
big.
times, Raymond doing it, Brian Plimple doing it back in I think it was 2004. Yeah, 2004. He did it in Myrtle Beach.
Yep.
And he had stopped competing for 2 years, and he just went out and did it and won that. Um, Even in 2010, Brian Young coming back after 2 years of his knee injury and fighting 16 times to win, you know. There's so many really cool ones. Yeah, Terada and Jesse Jones, the controversy of choreography and Terada, I believe, getting DQ'd on that one.
On stage.
Yeah, on stage. That was a wild one. What's happening, Alex?
And that's one for me though too. That was the one rule that like, and it came out on that was huge, right? So I would say the biggest knock in the NBL was the arbitrations. It got to be too much. But to me, at Super Grands, it's a year-end event, right?
Makes sense.
The judges let this guy get all the way to the stage.
Well, no, you're right. Oh, yeah, there was a lot of issues that should have happened
right
in the floor, and it got brought. You know, I remember other competitors bringing it up, and you know, it was just kind of like, oh, well, all right.
Because here's a perfect example, because it did happen to me, right? So I took third in Kempo, right? And I tied with David Kopic. He beat me in the tiebreaker, so he goes on in the stage, right?
Right.
Well, they essentially disqualified the guy who was in first place, and the judges said afterwards, the judge was like, well, he didn't do a Kempo form. Well, it's too late now. Like, he went through the division, and 5 judges said it's good. You can't now decide on stage, and it's no longer, because then you have the rest of the division, like me, sitting in there going, well, does that mean I should be in second place now? Because he got DQ'd.
Exactly.
Right? So that's another one.
Yeah, I know the Winsper brothers. I don't know if they were wild cards or just they had like a really low regional. I think they got a regional, you know, for that. But yeah, that
which one was that? Was that 99?
That was, I thought it was 98. 98 was the year they did that. Yeah, in Savannah. It was just that year to me, that team fighting of Liker beating Kanai and beating Bayer's best in the finals. That was just crazy, right? And again, you just look at that team: Keith Weston, Larry Tankson, and Matt Winsper. It's like, I mean, legends, all of them great fighters, but you're not thinking of that as a core like team, right?
No.
Against you know, Damon, Carlos Tierney, and Chris McBride, right? That was the Bay Area's team. The Kanai team that had lost earlier was Jason Tankson, Raymond Daniels, and then Derek Cox. So that was a great team as well. So lots of just
I don't feel like Keith gets enough credit for his continuous wins either.
His continuous play was awesome. Yeah. Keith, there's so many different records that people don't know about, and that was something that was cool. Regina Thompson winning the most, right? Then Colby and Sage Northcutt, you know, finally beating that, right? A record that I thought was really cool was like 5 for 5 was, I think he did it 2 years, maybe 3 years in a row. Willie Galvan winning, you know, Kempo, soft traditional, open traditional, soft weapons, and continuous. And he did that like back to back, right? And then didn't lose a division, right? And won all of those, right? You know, Casey coming in as a NASCA queen and winning and being successful in many different styles, right?
And she was unseated the first year too, right?
Yeah.
I want to say so, yeah.
Yeah. So was really cool. There's so many different competitors, man, that just had, you know, you're talking about when I was coming into it, the person that was the main guy was Adrian Ulanoff in the juniors, right? Winning 7 titles, you know.
Chris Sublett.
2 years later, Chris Sublett ties it, right? So, you know, there's so many, and those records lasted for many years. So
it's not even records though. Just look at how many great competitors came and went on the NBL. I mean, Valerie Bruce, it's just Kyle Gray.
Right, Kyle Gray was a great competitor.
You got a bunch, and the West Coast had a ton of them. Too many to count on the West Coast that were coming out. Seeing them at Super Grands, and you wouldn't see them again for a while.
Someone I always that was a big deal to me was Omar Guerrero. He was a big influence on the West Coast. You know, you had Ramir Mosquita, who's a legend to me. Chad Mason, like where are those guys at? You know, like so many great ones that started on that. You know, and guys that are in the, you know, like someone who's big choreographer and in the film industry now is Donald Lee. he was on Karate International, and a world champion, beating
That's
in
a team we
weapons.
forget about, right?
Yeah, Karate International, because they had the magazine and everything then. So there's so much we could talk about and go all over the place. It's kind of crazy. Yeah, I mean, for me, some of the those are big moments. Um, of course, being a part of Team Elite and Team CJB and us having those, that was really cool. Later on, when I was a part of Proper and being to where we won the Team of the Year and I was the Competitor of the Year at Super Grands in 2011. And then we had several other competitor. Like it was just a cool thing to be a part of that. For me, ending my NBL career, which was kind of funny. Like the year that I won my 5th overall Grands, I won my 5th Korean title and my 5th Open Musical title, which are all me getting the record all at that same time. So it was just a weird thing, and I wasn't even planning to compete at that tournament. It was just kind of like, you know what? I'll compete. I'm in Winston-Salem. Who knows what's going to happen? I'm going to compete. And I did those 2 divisions and then ended up winning. And it was just kind of a cool thing. And I didn't even think about it, that it was like the numbers all lined up, right?
Yeah.
But that was cool. Winning.
We all remember.
Go ahead.
Oh, talk about big moments for us with you. 2005.
You mean 2009 when I won? Or
was it 05? Did you not win 05? Wasn't 05?
No,
it was 09.
It was 09. It was later. It was 09 when I
09. I was there for both of those, but
Yeah.
I could have swore it was 05 because 05 was when I came back from overseas. I was just judging. I didn't compete that year. So 09
was the year you competed, and that was the year Galileo made it up. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, that was a big moment for me, especially as competitors at us. It took me a long time to win at Super Grands. And, I had won ISKA. I've been on stage and won the US Open. I've won NASCA. I won overseas. I won all the different things. And then I came to NBL, and it took me a lot longer to figure out how to win at Super Grands and even to do the seeding and stuff and get that right. I won pretty much every tournament and a lot of Grands at all the tournaments, but except Super Grands. So,
and as I said, Super Grands is always a different beast too.
Different, man. You had to really figure it out,
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a really cool thing. That was a crazy one too, because I had a fractured ankle, and Josh Gerber and I tied like 3 times in the daytime, and they kept making us go. And then we went on stage, and then I won. So,
but for us watching it was almost like you had enough. So like your frustration had came out like, doggone it, I've been here a lot, and why have I not won one of these? And it just was one of those things where it seemed like one of those things where all of us came back that were like, Bear was there, I was there, like all those that were there when late 90s, early 2000s happened to come back and for that Super Grands. A lot of us came back and competed, but a lot of us just were there.
Right.
And
yeah.
It was that one of those moments where like we all knew it. As soon as we walked in, it was just like, you know what? Screw this. I'm taking this division because I'm sick of not having one.
Right.
That's what I remember about that.
Yeah, it was. It definitely was. Yeah. That's funny. Yeah. Yeah, and there's so many. And what was cool was like Omar Guerrero actually had that. He went to most of the Super Grands and finally won in 98 and 99, right? But he went like 7-8 years without winning that, right?
Yeah. You gotta tell me, brother. Like I won my first Super Grands I won, and I won one after that. Ever.
Right. So you just never know, man. And but it was a cool animal. It was a cool thing. One of the things that I wanted to, my instructor and I, Johnny Watkins, who was a NBL champion as well, and as well as several other people in the Southeast, we were trying to get Boice to come down to which was, I still call it NBL Regional, which it's not an NBL Regional anymore, but to Doug Armstrong's tournament, and just couldn't get him to do it. He's happy doing his thing now. He is big into the antique world, which was something he was always doing, and trying to get that going. But we had a presentation and award So I'm just going to show that and do that, read what it is tonight. And next week after SMAC, my instructor is going to go up there for that event and then go over to Boice's and hang out and present that to him. So this is just a cool award. Here we go. I'm going to show this here. It has the NBL 30 logo on it, which is sick. And I'm just going to read what we have here just because of all the contributions. So your impactful legacy forever resonates in the hearts of competitors, family, friends, judges, staff, and martial arts enthusiasts. Thank you, Boice Lydell, for over 30 years of your uniquely unwavering authenticity. Thanks, you are loved for the memories. So just something that I feel like we need to give people their flowers, right? And a lot of us don't get to see that. And you know what? Hopefully we do the same thing to everyone else. You guys remember, you know what? Just enjoy life, right? And let people know that they meant something to you. I think that's something. So I believe, I don't know if the NBL site is still up. I believe it is. And the number, you could still call the number and talk to Boice and have a good conversation. And, you know, and he'll have a good time with you. But for me, that was something that even some of the competitors, my students, and were always saying was they used to love hanging out and messing with Boice after the tournaments, you know, and that was something that people, I think, forget about, was just like that he was fun loving, but he was also in a very stressful situation. They had to make some choices that kind of sucked. Do I think he's perfect? No. Am I perfect? No. Or any of us? No. So, and yes, we all got called after midnight, and yes, you do have to call after midnight. Thanks, Dave Clifton. That's right. But this is a fun time, man. A lot of fun talking about different memories. Thank you for coming on and sharing that with me. As again, that was how you and I met, and it's cool now to get you back competing as well and to be a part of the Martial Arts Center Network. When is your next episode of The Traditional Way coming on?
Should be dropping this Thursday. So this Thursday is the Dublin recap, and then after that, we're going to do every 2 weeks. So I got some other events coming up. We got a youth event in Mexico that got a couple of NASCA competitors that are giving it a go there. So we'll see how they go out. And then the Karate One Series A event that's in Cyprus is the following weekend after that. So I'll be recapping those two events. But let's be honest, the end of October is the World Championship. So that's the big one for the WKF. Only happens every 2 years. That's going to be a huge event. And that's in Budapest this year. So
okay. Awesome, man. Well, thank you, Brett. Thank you, guys. Thank you, insiders. And make sure you guys like and share and listen to the podcast and leave us a review as well, a positive one. All right. And yeah, thanks, guys, for joining in. Chris Gallio, David Clifton, Jericho, Andrew, David, all of you guys, thank you all so much for joining in. And this has been another episode of Inside Scoop with Alex and Jeff. I'm Jeff Doss. That is
Brett Shumway.
All right. Y'all have a blessed night. We'll see you next time.